The spiritual politics of the Mahatma, the father of the nation. Swagatham, welcome. Jai Hind. Even though it is widely known that Gandhi could not separate healthy politics from spiritual values and ideals, the logic for this has not been understood, even by professed Gandhians. The thoughts or contents of this video are dedicated entirely to making a beginning in the direction of understanding the sanctified logic to the spiritual paradigm of politics that Gandhi propounded. It's a paradigm that speaks to me particularly because one of my predecessors, Charles Freer Andrews, who taught in St. Stephen's College from 1904 to 1914 for 10 years, joined Gandhi's mission in South Africa, motivated and inspired by the then principal, Sushil Kumar Rudra. I have ever been mindful of the Charles Freer Andrews tradition, which to me constitutes a very valuable, significant strand in the heritage of St. Stephen's College. Now, therefore, the theme that I'm dealing with here is very dear to my heart. It's a vast theme, and I can only, as I said, attempt to make a humble beginning with this video. In his autobiography titled The Story of My Experiments with Truth, which I commend to all my viewers, it makes very simple, easy reading. I would say that it's a patriotic duty to read that book, marked by its candor as well as the relevance of its substance to the life of India. In that book, Gandhi states very clearly that in his view, his experiments in the sphere of spirituality were far more significant than his initiatives in the sphere of politics. And he also said that those who argue for a complete separation between religion and politics do not understand either. Gandhi, of course, would later on modify this position in view of the deleterious or harmful effect of communal religiosity when it is injected into mainstream politics. But that's not our concern here, so I will not turn my attention at all in that direction. So let us fix it very clearly in our mind that Gandhi believed that for politics to remain sound and healthy, it's necessary for politics to have a spiritual foundation. And Gandhi did not change his conviction in this respect. He changed his idea of the relevance or the necessary connection between religion and politics, but he never wavered from his conviction that spiritual values must constitute the animating force, or at least the guiding principle, of the understanding and practice of politics. And that's the reason why he understood fasts from time to time, and fasts are useful, or according to him, he deemed fasts to be useful in keeping himself purified, because he believed that for him to be an instrument fit in the hands of God to accomplish a mission as great, as daunting, and as profound as leading India to freedom could be accomplished only if he remained an instrument fit in the hands of God. And he understood purity to be the precondition, the essential condition of eligibility in that respect. In doing so, of course, he could claim an ancestry that goes back to Athenian Greece, to the Hebraic context of Jesus' times, and also several examples from the Indian historical tradition itself. To think of the great Chakravartins or great emperors India has produced, all of them had commendable spiritual sensitivities. Now, the question is, why should politics, the understanding and practice of politics, have a spiritual foundation? Now, in order to understand this, in order to think of and answer this question right, we need to have a basic understanding of what spirituality means. Unfortunately, the purpose or the scope of spirituality has been distorted and reduced to determining the eligibility of individuals to enter into better conditions either in the life after death or posthumous state or in the next birth or posthumous birth. Whereas the most valuable aspect of spirituality is that it plays a very profound and commendable role, a necessary role, in the continuing evolution of the human species, in the formation of every individual, and it's a guiding light that enables people to move from an animal state to a noble, dignified human state. Therefore, very simply, I would put the scope of spirituality as the bridge between the animal and the Mahatma. The bridge between the animal and the Mahatma. Now, therefore, let's understand what the animal signifies. What does it mean to be an animal? Quite simply, as even scientists and anthropologists will agree, an animal is entirely conditioned by its instinct or instincts. The technical word for this is instinctual conditioning of the animal. The Russian psychologist Pavlov conducted many experiments, Pavlovian experiments, just to demonstrate the extent to which animals can be conditioned. And the more conditioned an animal is, the less free it is morally. For example, one of the experiments conducted by Pavlov was to synchronize the ringing of a bell with giving food to a dog. Now, when this was repeated several times, each time the bell was rung, the dog under the experiment began to salivate because it correlated the sound of the bell, the gong, with food. But in the later stages of the experiment, only the gong was sounded and food was not produced. Still, the dog salivated because the dog is now conditioned to salivate at hearing the bell. Now, that's a problem with animals. Or take another example. A dog happened to lie on the way that you're walking, and unwittingly you step on its tail, it will instinctively bite you. The dog does not have the moral freedom to consider that situation and say, well, it was purely unintended. He didn't mean to hurt me. For the dog, these distinctions don't exist. It is merely conditioned to react, to bite when it is hurt. The same goes for any animal. You provoke a buffalo. The buffalo will not say, oh, this man is doing this in jest. He's merely trying to provoke me. He doesn't mean any harm. No, it will come and gore you if it can. The same goes for all animals. Now, suppose you approach a pigeon or any bird sitting there in your courtyard. You intend to be most affectionate towards it. But it will fly away in spite of your overflowing effusive love for that bird. Because the bird is conditioned to fly away at any perception of risk. And as far as the bird is concerned, your approaching the bird is a risk. Now, the problem is the distinction between animals and human beings who otherwise belong to the species animals. That's why in every definition of man there is the word animal. Man is a rational animal, man is a tool-making animal, man is a meaning-seeking animal, man is a worshipping animal, rational animal, political animal, social animal, whatever else it is, he's an animal. But the point is, we all have a need to go beyond the animal state. The question is, how can that be achieved at all? The predominant means available to us is spirituality as against religion. A clear distinction must be made in this. In fact, religion also conditions us and robs us of our moral freedom, as a result of which we begin to function exactly like animals, though in this context we would be religious animals, behaving, reproducing the behavior mode of animals, but in defense of or to the benefit of the particular religion, particular sect, particular denomination to which we belong. The purpose of spirituality is actually to lift us out of it, or to deliver us, to liberate us from that animal state of being completely conditioned by the tyranny of our instincts, and to take us to a level of moral freedom which is impossible in the animal kingdom. That's why we don't think of morality in the context of animals. We can think of morality in the way human beings deal with animals, but we can't think of morality in connection with specific animals. You don't have a moral buffalo, you don't have an ethical elephant, you don't have an enlightened pelican, so on and so forth. So, politics is the art of living together to each other's benefit in a country. That's the simplest definition of politics I can give you. And this art of living together to the benefit of each other also means respecting each other's basic rights, sentiments, dignity, uniqueness, and helping each other grow and develop towards attaining the fulfillment of one's personal destiny or even collective destiny as a distinctive group. This calls for a lot of self-transcendence. And instinctual conditioning is the very opposite of self-transcendence. Self-transcendence means that you deliberately rise above the compulsions of your instincts. For example, Jesus said, if someone slaps you on one cheek, show the other. Whereas if you are instinctually conditioned, you cannot even think of doing so, because even before you think, you would have given him a slap in return. And if you look at all the spiritual teachings, whether it is by Jesus Christ or by Lord Buddha or by any spiritual luminary, you will find this as a common factor, namely, in distinctive ways, the same goal is pursued, namely, generating resources, guidelines, as well as motivations to enable human beings to progress from the mere animal state to a state far, far higher than that, which is the state of being human. Not being man or woman, but human, humanity, being human, or as Shakespeare says, human kindness. He talks about the milk of human kindness. It's a beautiful expression. It's in a play called Macbeth. Now, reaching that level is not to be taken for granted or to be taken lightly. It can be achieved only through a very, very laborious process of correcting oneself, improving oneself, training oneself, and liberating oneself from one's slavery to one's instinctual, the domination of one's own instincts. From a spiritual point of view, unevolved individuals, or individuals who are closer to the animal behavior, are in a state of inner slavery. What is spiritual freedom? What is moral freedom? The scope and extent of moral freedom or spiritual freedom is to limit the instincts of the self in order to act according to certain values and higher ideals. For example, when every religion says, treat others as you want to be treated, whereas the instinctive animal nature in us says, I will treat you the way I want, but you must treat me as I want. I will not treat you as you want, but you must treat me as I want. Now, this is animal nature. Now, you look at nature for a minute. Animal nature is life in nature, as Hobbes, the British thinker, said. Uh, the, the Leviathan, Hobbes, the Leviathan, his work on political ideals, his idea of politics and formation of state, and theory of social contract, as far as Rousseau is concerned. Hobbes in England does more or less similar thinking. So the need to form the state arises, and politics happen only within the state. Politics does not happen in the jungle. The need to form the state arises, according to Hobbes and according to Rousseau, because human beings, if there is no external agency to control their behavior, will give free play to their animal instincts, and according to Hobbes, every man's hand will be at the throat of his neighbor. So life will degenerate into complete anarchy. And that's a problem when human beings don't outgrow their animal nature. So what happens when spirituality becomes the norm? Now, spirituality becomes the dominant influence. We are liberated from this inner slavery, the slavery to our own instincts and impulses, and empowered to act according to common principles, rational goals, shared objectives, guided also by universal values and ideals that are applicable to everyone. If we are not so liberated from within, we would expect others to practice all these values so that we can benefit from it, but we will exempt ourselves from the duty to have to practice these values. Because to practice values, as Immanuel Kant, one has to constrain oneself, one has to limit oneself. For example, if you want to bear witness to truth, if you want to be truthful in your life, you'll have to constrain yourself. Sometimes you may have to sacrifice your personal interest in order to be truthful. Sometimes you have to run considerable risks in standing for justice. Sometimes you'll have to incur personal risk in practicing compassion, so on and so forth. But if you're completely conditioned by the tyranny of your instincts, you'll never be able to reach that level. And each man will only think and act for himself and act selfishly. And the extent of the cruelty that is embedded or implied in at selfishness could vary from individuals to individual, but the collective impact, the collective outcome of that potential cruelty is horrendous. Horrendous. So the only way healthy politics can be practiced, according to Gandhi, and I fully agree with him, is to ensure that all citizens attain a minimum degree of spiritual enlightenment, which actually means unwavering commitment to certain values. Now let's look at the practical side of this. Gandhi was eminently practical. Perhaps he was the saintliest practical man history has ever seen. So practical. He combined common sense and spirituality to an astonishing degree. So what did Gandhi do? Gandhi did not launch himself into any religious preaching. He didn't preach a religion. What did he preach? He preached truth. And he preached truth not with his mouth, but with his life. And that's what he's saying in his autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, where he says that he turned all of his life, particularly his participation in the political struggles, the struggle for freedom for India, as a spiritual enterprise. And all of the essence of the spiritual enterprise was unwavering commitment to truth. Therefore, he titled his autobiography as The Story of My Experiments with Truth. Now comes the practical shrewdness of Mahatma Gandhi. He knew that it sufficed to focus on just one value, truth. Why? Because if one value is to be practiced, all other values also have to be upheld. The practical truth of the matter is that all values exist as part of one integrated whole. Therefore, you can't cull out or separate one value, practice it as a matter of specialization, and violate all the rest. If you do that, to the extent that you violate other values, your capacity to practice truth will be compromised. For example, in order to tell the truth, in order to stand by truth, in order to stay steadfast on the foundation of truth, you have to have love in your heart. Gandhi's own commitment to truth was because of his love for the people of India, and it was his love for the people of India that made him committed passionately to justice for the people of India. So that's the third value: truth, love, justice. And if you remember that memorable scene from Richard Attenborough's film Gandhi, where Gandhi sets out on a journey to find out the realities of Indian life, and he comes across that woman, half-clad woman, but only just one sari, and he takes off his cloth, the upper cover of his body, floats it towards a woman who was compassion. You can't understand Gandhian politics without compassion. Actually, even though Gandhi equated ahimsa with truth, the fact of the matter is that ahimsa requires the confluence of all these four fundamental, inalienable, universal values: truth, love, justice, compassion. You see all four of them in Gandhi, and the practical outworking of this confluence of the four universal values is the caring culture which Gandhiji tried to demonstrate. For example, even as great in historical parleys would be in progress, he would get up from the midst of it and go and feed a goat in the courtyard. Compassion. Compassion even to the mute. This used to irritate his associates, but he was actually transmitting a value and making a value statement to them. Now, you remove all of this. You remove truth, you remove love, you remove caring, you remove compassion, you remove justice from the practice of politics. What do you get? You get the politics of the jungle. Unfortunately, that is a malady, that's a horrendous epidemic that is staring us in the face. When we proudly say that we live in the world of post-truth politics, please understand that it also means post-justice politics, post-love politics, post-compassion politics, so on and so forth. Want an example? Manipur. An entire state has been burning for more than a year. Not the slightest tinge of compassion. Why? There is no truth. There is no justice. There is no sense of fellow feeling. There is no caring culture. Doesn't matter. It's as if Manipur doesn't exist. Gandhi would never have had this attitude. Gandhi would have been shocked at the very thought of such a possibility. My dear friends, this itself is good enough illustration to help all of us to see that politics without spirituality can be a very scary thing. And unfortunately, what happens is that the real horrendous consequences of this will begin to manifest only in slow measures, gradually over a period of time. Today I am the victim, so everybody else stands, watches, it's fine. Tomorrow it's somebody else's turn. Day after it is your turn. As Pastor Niemöller said, when Hitler came for the Jews, I did not stir a little finger because I was not a Jew. I didn't mind it. Then he came for the Marxists. I looked the other way because I'm not a Marxist. Then he came for the labor union people. I didn't bother because I'm not a labor union activist. Then he came for Catholics. I didn't bother. Finally, he came for me, and I cried out for help, but there was nobody left. That is the problem when spiritual values are completely cast out of the understanding and practice of politics. It's a horrendous process, it's a horrendous reality. The sooner we wake up to it, the better. And it's because of the realization that casting out spiritual values from politics is tantamount to national suicide. That's the gravity with which I view this issue. It's because of this that even though I have really no interest in my old age in the actual dynamics of Indian politics, I say something positive and appreciative about what Rahul Gandhi signifies. Because to the extent that I can understand, what he's trying to do is to bring spiritual values into the practice of Indian politics. If Gandhi focused on truths, Rahul Gandhi, in the present day context, is focusing on love. That's why he's talking about opening an outlet of love in this bazaar of hate. Love. But again, as Rahul Gandhi already understands, and I hope he understands, you cannot really talk about love in isolation from all other values because one value necessarily involves all the rest. Either you practice values in toto, values in their entirety, or you don't practice any value. And I'm sure the young man knows. So, the theme that we are considering now is one of extreme significance. It's bound to affect, the implications of this are bound to affect every Indian, not just the designated minorities. If you look at the political scenario, the leaders who have been, shall I say, hounded, the vast majority of them are Hindus. Arvind Kejriwal is not a Hindu, not a Muslim. Manish Sisodia is not a Christian. And the many political leaders against whom ED CBI proceedings are initiated without any prospect of any verdict ever being issued against them, merely for the harassment value, they're not Muslims, they're all Hindus. So ultimately, what matters is not whether somebody is a Muslim or a Hindu. What matters is, for example, if you throw a bone to a pack of dogs, the dogs will never ask, is this bone a Christian bone or a Muslim bone? If it's a Muslim bone, I don't want it. Or somebody else says, if it's a Christian bone, I don't want it. No, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's a bone. And I must have that bone. So ultimately, it is nothing but the struggle for the bone. And that bone is called power. And whoever stands in the way, a dog bites a fellow dog not because that dog has anything ideologically against the other dog. The dog bites and barks against the other dog because it stands in the way of it getting the bone it covets. That's why I say that in the political context, that bone is the seat of power. That's the only thing that operates in this domain. Everything else is misleading propagandists flourish. Nobody really is hated because he's a Muslim or a Christian. People are hated only because there seem to be political inconveniences. If, for example, tomorrow all the Muslims in this country take a decision to support a particular party, 100% without exception, all the hostility against them will stop. I'm pretty sure about that. Well, let me not go too much into it. But my fundamental thesis, therefore, is that the way that the Rashtrapita, the father of the nation, has blazed for us, namely, the only way to keep the understanding and practice of politics healthy and life affirming, within which the welfare of the citizens of India can be ensured, is by enlivening and enlightening the practice of politics with spiritual values. And these spiritual values are common to all religious traditions. And therefore, commitment to multi-religious liberal democracy as envisaged in the Constitution of India should mean infusing spiritual values into the practice of politics so that the health of Indian politics, health of Indian democracy, the welfare of the people of India can be ensured. That was Gandhi's goal. That should be the only goal guiding anything political, and that guarantee rests only with the spiritual awakening, the spiritual refinement, the spiritual enlivening of political culture, political process, political goals. And that's the only way to ensure good governance. There's no other way, as by now all of us should be convinced, because all the promises about good governance have not taken us anywhere. If anything, that good governance seems to be receding. Certainly, the people of Manipur would agree with me. Where is good governance for them? Are they not Indians? So, therefore, let's be very clear about this. If spiritual values are removed from human behavior, from the dynamics of public life, we are left only with a jungle. And in the politics of the jungle, nobody is safe. Satyameva Jayade, Jnanardam. Jai Hind.